Hello, my friends. I want to ask the question, does controlling guns control criminal behavior? Does controlling guns control criminal behavior? We hear a lot of talk about gun control, but does that really control criminal behavior? They are words of a song, but nevertheless they ring true throughout life. And that song says, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's too little of. And I agree with that. There's no doubt that the world needs love. But there are some other things that are lacking in America, which includes but are not limited to what I call creative thought and independent and forward thinking. Now that's my take, so don't hate. Welcome to another Thursday. And of course today is Thursday, May the 13th. So it got a little cool, so I had to break out the old sweatshirt. I trust and pray that all is well with you and your family. And I want you to know something. We did not get to where we are as a nation by being afraid to think outside the box. We didn't get this far by being politically correct. And we didn't get to where we are today by what I call cookie cutter thinking, where everybody thinks alike. I mean, right now we're so busy trying to be sophisticated and orderly and non-threatening that we have essentially rendered ourselves helpless and defenseless. You know, we no longer come up with good ideas and fresh ideas. Instead, we continue to recycle old ideas and wonder why they aren't working. Well, I mean, to me, it's like a warmed over biscuit. It's not worth eating. You know, and when you look around, you see it in the clothes we wear, in our fashion, you see it in the vehicle design, you see it in the ways in which we govern and police, you see it in how we think and in how we make decisions. It's the same old woman with a new dress on or the same old guy with a new tie, okay? And as long as we use those old ideas and the old way of thinking as a standard, we will forever be stagnant and paralyzed as a nation. Being stuck in a certain mode is not always by accident or by coincidence. Sometimes it can be a carefully thought out and a carefully constructed conspiracy to keep us at a certain level in life or to keep a certain people at a certain level in life. Now I say all that to say this. Until we start thinking outside the box to address the issue with violence that we often blame on guns, and until we become bold enough to think outside the norm as it relates to policing and governing in our nation, we will continue to run around like chickens with our heads cut off. That's the way Mama and them used to say it. I mean, it's the same old stale thoughts and attitudes on gun control, the same old stale thoughts on policing, the same old thoughts and attitudes on politics in America that have us at a stalemate, a standstill. It's no wonder we can't find reasonable and relevant answers to the issues that continue to plague us as a nation and as a community. We have intimidated people so and embarrassed them so and criticized them so that they're afraid to say what's on their minds. They're afraid to say anything or do anything outside of what is expected of them to say or do. We're in a bad way. You know, and I want to finish this conversation at a later time and talk about the need for radical thinking, but I'll do that in another episode. For now, let's get to the issue of gun control and its perceived effect on violence and criminal activity in America. Does gun control, whatever is meant by gun control, does it control criminal behavior? My answer is absolutely not. Of course, you know that's my take. You know, some may find it strange that a black Baptist preacher in America is talking so much about guns and gun control. But my answer to them is, with all the black lives and other lives that are being impacted and taken by the use of guns, I didn't say by guns, but by the use of guns, why aren't more preachers talking about the issue? And why aren't we saying more than what is being said even at this present time? Why aren't preachers, why aren't community leaders talking more about guns and gun control? Why aren't churches doing more? Why are we not doing more and saying more to honestly address the situation, or at least engage in dialogue? You know, as I said in one of my recent quotes, I said something like this: it's time that we become concerned about the things that concern us. And guns concern us. At the rate it's killing people, it concerns us. And if the misuse of guns is killing us at such an alarming rate, either through violence or through accidental shootings, that is cause for concern. Why? So why are we so silent on the issue? Now, well, I got to say in all fairness that not everyone has the knowledge and the training and the experience with guns as I and many others who have served in the military or in law enforcement, or those who may have grown up in a family of sport shooters or hunters, you know, and we expect us to be kind of familiar with guns, but there may be some others who are not, so I ain't mad at you because you don't talk about it. You know, I don't know why it is so hard for us to understand that guns don't kill. They are unfortunately sometimes used to kill, but guns are inanimate objects that can do nothing without the intervention, can do nothing without the involvement of a living soul. That means it can do nothing by itself. It needs you or me, okay? But it's easy to blame something, blame everything on something that can't defend itself. Blame it for our failures and our neglect and our irresponsibility. And as with anything, I believe some regulation is needed. You know, we can't take the attitude that one of our more notable politicians who said that we shouldn't need a mandate for people to do the right thing. In other words, he was saying that we don't really need a law. We don't need laws because people know what's right to do and they're just going to do it. And, when I thought about that, I thought, now he may be a little slow, but I don't believe he's that naive. I think he may have been, may have drank the wrong Kool-Aid and let politics get the best of him. Oh, but yes, we need laws. We need mandates. And we need some regulation regardless of whatever the subject matter may be. That's just the nature of things. But I must say again, I must make this very clear. I am not advocating for or against guns or ownership of guns. I'm not advocating one way or the other on that. I'm advocating for life. I'm advocating for education. I'm advocating for safety and our rights as Americans. If we allow the government to manipulate one part of the Constitution, it won't be long before they will start working on another. And I think that most of you know that as well as I. And that's the fear of most Americans on any issue. You give them an inch and they will take a mile. Amen. And this particular issue of guns, it may not concern you, but the next one that comes under attack may be right down your alley. So you will do well, my friend, to take notice now. This is a complex issue that is not likely to be resolved anytime soon. Listen, and the reason being is that we are afraid of radical thinking and we reject anything or any thought that is not familiar to us or that is not agreeable to us. We don't need gun control nearly as much as we need violence control, people control, policing control, and shall I dare say, politician control. Amen. People don't become criminals because guns are available to them. Although some criminals do use guns, the lack of a gun doesn't stop that person from being a criminal. Are you hearing what I'm saying? A criminal will use anything that they can get their hands on in the commission of a crime. Be it guns, knives, rocks, sticks, lies, deceit, and anything else that happens to be available to them. But guns don't make people criminals. Please hear me. Listen, the misuse of a motor vehicle can kill people. And yes, we have some regulations for the ownership and use of motor vehicles. The misuse of drugs and alcohol can and does kill people. And yes, we have some regulations for the ownership and use of drugs and alcohol. Even the misuse of tobacco can and does kill people. And of course, we have regulations regarding the ownership and the use of tobacco products. And the misuse of guns can kill people. Notice I didn't say guns. I said the misuse of guns can, listen, and does kill people. And indeed, we need some form of regulation, but those regulations, whatever they may be, they must be regulations that don't threaten or infringe upon our right as American citizens to own and bear arms. I submit to you that violence in America is a monster of our own making. And if gun use is out of control, that too is a monster of our own making. And I'll speak more on this a little bit later, but let me just say this, that, and I'll talk more about it later, maybe you'll understand it better later, but that military weapons, tactics, technology, and vehicles tend to trend downward to law enforcement and eventually to the public. And this is one of the problems with guns. When the military goes bigger, eventually we go bigger. Which is why, we now drive vehicles that belong on the battlefield. We use technology and equipment that belong on the battlefield. And yes, we use weapons that belong on the battlefield. They don't belong in our community. They don't belong in our society. But that's the monster we've created. And one of the biggest problems we have with policing is that listen to what we're doing. We are developing attitudes and behaviors and cultures in law enforcement that belong on the battlefield and not in our communities. Are you hearing what I'm saying? And I'll be the first to admit, unfortunately, some of our communities are like battlefields. But my take on that is that we have allowed it to become so. We have created this monster, and it just continues to escalate. Instead of police departments in our communities, what we're having now? We have many military units stationed in our communities. Not police officers, not police departments that are there to protect and to serve. It's more like a combat zone. I'm talking about even when you're in a peaceful neighborhood. It's almost like you got tanks rolling through the streets. And we are more and more like a nation living under foreign occupation. Please hear what I'm saying. Now, you may not agree with it, but I believe that if you don't understand it now and see it now, you're going to see it. And you're going to see it and understand it very soon. It's time to stop the blame game. Every time there's an unfortunate incident involving guns, the politicians and the police rush to the microphone, rush to the podium, shouting and touting gun control. Listen, my friend, you're looking at a government, you're looking at a nation, you're looking at law enforcement that is failing miserably at protecting its citizens. And of course, someone has to take the fall. We got to blame somebody. So guns become the scapegoat. Guns become the villain. Then when politicians need a boost in their ratings, immigration and gun control become their favorite tool and their favorite target. Guns have become the scapegoat for ineffective governing and ineffective policing. Every time the government fails to provide adequate protection for its citizens, they shift the blame to gun ownership and gun use. Likewise, my friend, every time the police fail to protect the communities of America, what do? They shift the blame to gun use and gun ownership. And everybody's playing this blame game. But I must admit now, there's one small detail that is being overlooked by the people, by the politicians, and by the police, is that nothing positive can happen in our communities without the input, without the involvement, without the engagement, and without the help of the citizens of that community. I need to say that because before you start blaming the police, before you start blaming the government, let me ask you something. How much are you involved? What are you saying about the situation? How involved are you? Listen, if you're not involved, listen, you cannot complain, my friend. The police or the government cannot do it by themselves, but they must do their part. And those responsibilities that are assigned to our government, to our police, to our law enforcement, they must live up to those responsibilities. And oftentimes, in many cases, they are not. They are not. And listen, but we have to participate with them. We have to help them. Not only that, but we must hold them accountable. Amen. Laws are needed, but many of these laws that they're coming up with infringe upon the rights of innocent, law-abiding citizens and have little or no effect on the criminal element of society. You know, sometimes when I think about laws and the laws we come up with in Georgia and in our nation, throughout our nation, I'm like, who in the world came up with this? Listen, of course we need laws. Of course we need mandates. Of course we need rules. Of course we need policy and procedure. But we can't come up with things that go against our Constitution. And when people start playing with the Constitution, you better look at it. We might as well just throw it away. We might as well just throw it away. And laws are, listen, laws are to protect the innocent, not to punish the innocent. And that's what's happening. You know, these laws that we're making affect those law-abiding citizens. So how can this government, in good conscience, ask the people of this country to give up their guns or limit their guns when the criminals still have their guns? How can you ask us to do that? You know, my view is this: as long as you fail to protect me, don't you try to control or restrict the way that I choose to protect myself. If you are charged with protecting me, and if you fail at doing your job, then you have nothing to say about how I do my job and how I protect myself. So don't be trying to take my gun. If you don't have me covered, then let me handle it myself. Okay? And let me tell you something. This is from a few years back. But one of the craziest things that I ever heard of, like I said, I don't know who thinks this stuff up. One of the craziest things I ever heard of was what was called a gun buyback program. Y'all remember that one? A gun buyback program where it was mostly in the major cities where law-abiding citizens were urged to turn their guns in, give them back to the government, give them to some group that was collecting them, or sell them for pennies on the dollar. Listen, I mean law-abiding citizens. A gun buyback program. That you were supposed to bring and a lot of people did. I don't get it, but a lot of people did that. They brought their guns, not the criminals, but the law-abiding citizens brought their guns and gave them to these groups that were set up somewhere, turn them in, and they gave them a few pennies on the dollars, maybe in some cases didn't give them anything. Then some of the other guys, kind of got, thought about that and said, wait a minute, if y'all are that crazy to bring your guns, let me just park right up the street. And if they give you pennies on the dollar, I give you a nickel on the dollar, and I'll take your guns. And that's what happened. That's what happened. It was not a gun buyback. It was more like a gun giveaway. Let me tell you something, my friend. We don't need a gun buyback. We don't need to buy guns back from the law-abiding citizens of America. We need a gun takeaway. We need a gun take back. Well, we take back guns from the criminals, not from the innocent law-abiding people. We don't need a gun buyback program. We need a gun take back program that's aimed at the criminals and not at the honest citizens of our communities. All right? Okay. All right. Let me just talk about very quickly a few things that I want to actually elaborate on at a later date. Not now, not today. But I just want you to know, I just want to kind of alert you that these are some things that I want to talk about at a later time so that you can kind of be prepared, and hopefully you'll tune in as we continue these particular discussions. When it comes to gun control, when it comes to the issue of violence and the issue of guns in our nation, I believe that we need more of gun education, more so than gun regulation and gun legislation. I believe that we need gun education. And as I told you before, at the top of that list of educating our people, our children and our people, is helping them to understand, as well as police, helping them to understand the value and the sanctity of life. That's more important than anything. That we understand life and how valuable life is, how the sanctity of life. And I think that if we could get to that, where we begin to educate people on guns and not just leave them to be exposed to guns from the criminal element, but we need gun education. I mean, guns are part of our society. They're not going anywhere. So I think that we ought to educate our children, educate ourselves on guns. And at the top of that list is understanding the value and the sanctity of life. Before we get to anything, we need to understand that. Okay? So that's one of the things that I'm going to be talking more about, because I believe that that's something that is desperately needed. Instead of always trying to come up with a law, why don't we just try to educate people sometime? Why don't we try just encouraging people sometime? Why don't we try asking people to do certain things instead of coming up with laws all the time? Okay? Now listen, this is some radical thinking now, so hold on. If we're going to ban anything, I believe that we should ban toy guns and gun replicas. I told you before, every gun is a real gun. Every gun is a loaded gun, and you really have to see it that way. Again, if you don't believe me, ask your local police department. Ask those police officers on the street. How are they going to see it if you happen to suddenly appear with a toy gun or a gun replica? Ask them, what are they seeing? Because you know what's going to happen? They are going to respond to what they see. And they don't see a toy gun. They don't see a gun replica. They see a gun. And they see a loaded gun. And they see it as a threat to them. Are you hearing me, my friend? Again, I'm serious. If we're going to ban anything, I think we should ban toy guns and gun replicas. Okay? Because guns are serious business. They're not toys. A gun is a lethal weapon. I'll get to that in a moment, but guns are lethal weapons. Okay? And we introduce our children to guns through toys and then try to tell them that they should not own guns when they become adults. Let me ask you something. Let me just say something. You don't issue driver's license to children. You don't allow children to buy or use alcohol or watch it being used even on television. You don't allow children to use tobacco products or even allow them to see it being advertised on television. So why allow the violence and all the guns through television and through so-called harmless games and toys? Why expose them to that? Okay? All right. Another thing that I'm going to be talking about and elaborating on is this. If a person, and this is my take, keep remembering that, it's my take. If a person qualifies to own one type of gun, my take is they should be able to own any type of gun they want to own. And my position is this, that if a person can own one gun, they should be allowed to own as many guns as they want to, or as many guns as their money can buy. I don't see a problem. I don't see this gun restriction thing. I don't get it. You're either qualified to own or to possess a gun, or you're not. And if you are, then to me, it's across the board. Some more of that radical thinking. Okay. Next, listen, outside of sports shooting. Outside of sports shooting. Please understand this. A gun is a lethal weapon and should only be seen and handled as such. A lethal weapon. A weapon that kills. All right? I mean, that's why I told you before, I don't believe in this warning shots, and I don't believe in threatening people with guns. Listen, it's much too serious than that. Because when you own a gun, when you got to understand the responsibility that goes along with that. That could take somebody's life. It's a lethal weapon. I'm going to give you some more radical thinking now. And when I say that it ought to be handled as such, it ought to be seen as such, a gun is a lethal weapon, not something to be waved around. We got to get out of this Wild West mentality. We got to get out of this stuff that we see on television, that we see, in videos and all this kind of stuff. Guns are not toys, and nor should guns be used as tools to frighten or to control or to intimidate people. Threatening somebody with a gun, I'm telling you, is a very quick way to get yourself killed. That's what we used to say it in the neighborhood. That's a quick way to get yourself killed. Waving guns and folks, that's a good way, listen, for somebody to take you out. You don't use guns to try to control people. And I'm not just talking about the citizens. I'm really going radical now. But I believe that police officers as well, law enforcement, you know my background, military, law enforcement, you know my background. All right? But I believe that with police officers, they should not use guns. I know it's been done since dirt, but now it's time for some radical thinking. I don't believe that a police officer should ever remove their weapon from their holster unless and until they are at a point where they are ready and prepared to kill somebody. Period. This business. Why do you need a gun in your hand to say, stop or I'll shoot? Why do you need a gun in your hand to say, get out of the car? Why do you need a gun in your hand to say, show me your driver's license? That's why so many people are being killed by police officers. Sometimes it's what they call by accident. If you don't have the gun in your hand, you can't shoot anybody. And I hear what you're saying. You already know. I've been there, done that. I've been shot. You may know I've been in the military. You may know I've been in law enforcement, but I've also been shot. Yes. And I hear what you're saying. That puts me at a disadvantage. That puts me at the only thing I can tell you is learn how to draw and learn how to draw quickly. Because we got to change the way we're doing things. It's time to change. It's time for radical thinking. And even police officers need to stop waving guns around. That is a lethal weapon. And to take somebody's life, is that something you want to live with? I know you don't want anybody to take your life. I feel you. But I don't believe you want to take anybody's life either. I don't believe it. I know that a lot of people out there would disagree with me. But I don't believe there are police officers out there that are just chomping at the bits to kill people. I don't believe that. I do believe that we have a lot of scared police officers out there. And I believe that many of them react out of fear. I don't believe they really want to kill anybody. They're human beings just like the rest of us are. I don't believe they want that on their conscience. I don't believe their family want it on their conscience for them to kill somebody. I don't think people are really out there wanting to do that other than killers. No, because sometimes killers do end up in uniform. But as a rule, I don't think that's the case. Okay? And I don't think we ought to use guns to try to intimidate people, to try to control people. Keep that gun holstered. Okay? We got to get out of this Wild West stuff and this mentality and the television version. That's the television version of policing and defending ourselves. Why do you need a gun in these cases? I'm talking about when you got one and you're waving it around. If you're not ready to use it, put it away. Because I believe that when we adopt some new thoughts and new ideas, it'll cut down on police killings and it'll cut down on accidental shootings. You saw again, I mentioned this last week, but you saw it, many of you saw it. This police officer said that she thought she was pulling a taser, she pulled a gun and killed somebody. That gun should never be pulled unless you intend to kill somebody. And certainly you ought to know the difference between a gun and a taser. Okay? All right. I'm just saying. All right. So, I mean, that's, again, just some things that I want to elaborate on in the very near future, the next few lessons that we talk about. And the police, too, police departments, they need to be taught on the value and the sanctity of life. They need to understand that the citizens are not their enemies. We're not enemies. We're not in a war. Listen, and we've got this escalation of guns. Instead of being forced into the escalation of guns among people and within law enforcement, why not call for and implement a de-escalation of guns among criminals? Because you already know if they go big, we have to go just as big or bigger. So the madness just continues to escalate. You don't even remember this. You can't even imagine this. That at one time, police officers only carried a .38 special, and in some cases, they may have had a shotgun in the vehicle. But you know what happened? It escalated. Because when the criminals got AK-47s, the police got AK-47s. When the criminals got AR-15s, then the police officer got AR-15s. And it just continues to escalate. And you know, if the police officer get it, if the military has it, eventually it's going to end up in the hands of the citizens. You know, so why do we have, big guns? Because everybody else got big guns. Why do we have so many guns? Because everybody else got so many guns. So it just continues to escalate. Now that's my take. What do you have to say? Come on, sound off. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it always. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing to our YouTube channel and following us on Facebook. And if I don't see you on Sunday, I want to invite you. Yeah, I'm the preacher talking about guns, but I also want to see you on Sunday where I'm going to talk about Jesus. Okay? And I love to see you. If I don't see you on Sunday, I look forward to seeing you by next Thursday. We're going to continue this discussion, and I do solicit your prayers as I pray for you. God bless you, and may God keep you is my prayer.